Olivia was never a daughter. To her toxic parents, she was a blank check. They dressed her in pretty clothes and painted smiles for the neighbors, but behind closed doors, they plotted how much they could sell her for. When she turned 21, they found the perfect deal. Marry her off to a wealthy man she despised. The price? A luxury house and a brand new car for themselves. But on her wedding night, Olivia vanished, with a secret that would bury her parents' greed forever. What would you do if your own parents sold you like property? Drop a comment. We want to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping family revenge stories that expose toxic parents for what they truly are. Olivia Hale grew up in the kind of house that looked perfect from the sidewalk. Fresh white paint, trimmed roses, and holiday lights that flickered on cue every winter. Neighbors would smile and say, "What a lovely family." But behind those polished doors lived secrets and silent deals. Her parents, Margaret and Philip Hale, were masters at wearing masks. To the church community, they were generous donors and proud parents of a beautiful only child. But when the doors shut and the curtains were drawn, Olivia learned her worth was measured in dollars, not love. As a child, Olivia would sit at the top of the stairs, hugging her knees while listening to her parents fight about bills, debts, and how that girl better pay off one day. School trips were canceled so they could save up for fancy parties to impress potential business partners. New clothes came only when the neighbors might notice. But the worst part was that no one saw. No teacher asked. No friend really knew. By 17, Olivia realized her future was not hers to dream about. College brochures disappeared. A hidden acceptance letter she'd saved from her dream university was found in the trash, shredded by her mother, who told her, "College is a waste. You'll marry well instead." And so the grooming began. Banquets, charity galas, uncomfortable dinners with older men who gave her father lingering handshakes and her mother tight-lipped smiles. Every compliment about her beauty felt like a price tag being polished. When Olivia turned 21, the Hales struck gold. Robert Whitman, a 40-something real estate tycoon with a receding hairline and a fortune big enough to erase the Hales' mountain of debt, took interest in Olivia. He didn't care that she barely spoke to him. He liked that she was quiet, compliant, trained to nod and smile. Her parents didn't ask what she wanted. They presented her with a dress, a ring, and a promise. "Do this for us, and you'll make this family proud." But Olivia knew pride was just a word they used to hide their toxic parents' brand of betrayal. The night before the wedding, she sat in her childhood bedroom. The same faded wallpaper, the same broken lamp, and stared at herself in the mirror. Was this it? Was this all she was good for? Then, something snapped inside her. A flicker of rebellion she hadn't felt since she was a little girl, scribbling secret college essays at midnight. She remembered her grandfather, her mother's father, the only one who ever showed her real kindness. He'd passed when she was 15, and after the funeral, her parents whispered about how they'd taken care of the paperwork. She knew what paperwork meant in this house. Secrets, lies, money. Hours before she was to walk down the aisle, Olivia found herself in her father's study. She knew the safe code. Her father was arrogant enough to use his birthday for everything. With trembling hands, she searched through folders and found what she suspected all along. Her grandfather's original will. It named her, and only her, as the sole heir to the family estate, an inheritance her parents had stolen and hidden for years. Outside, the wedding guests waited. The groom checked his watch. Margaret fussed with a champagne glass, imagining the car she'd buy next. But Olivia, draped in white satin and stolen courage, walked out the back door instead. Into the night, away from the prison disguised as a home, and in her hands she carried more than a piece of paper. She carried proof, a weapon that would one day destroy the lie her toxic parents built on her back. Olivia didn't run far that first night. She didn't have a plan, just the will clutched to her chest and a suitcase she'd hidden under her bed for years, packed with clothes she'd bought from part-time jobs her parents never bothered to ask about. She spent the first night at a cheap motel on the edge of town. She locked the door, wedged a chair under the handle, and sat awake on a creaky bed, staring at the yellowed ceiling. Every sound made her flinch. A car pulling into the parking lot, a door slamming shut down the hall. She imagined her father's voice, cold and cutting. "Ungrateful girl, you owe us everything." For a moment, fear nearly dragged her back home. But then she unfolded the will again, her grandfather's signature, neat and certain, like the way he'd tuck her hair behind her ear when she was small and whisper, "One day, you'll see your worth live." By morning, she knew there was no going back. Her toxic parents would come for her, and they would come hard. Within 24 hours, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. First, it was her mother, her voice sweet and sticky like poisoned honey. "Come home, darling. Let's talk this through." Then, the sweetness turned sour. Threats, guilt, sobs that sounded forced. Her father's voice thundered through the line. "Do you think you can run from us? You owe us that house, that life. Without us, you are nothing." Olivia shut off her phone, tossed the SIM card in a gas station trash can, and bought a burner. It was the first of many small freedoms, each tiny rebellion a seed of something bigger. For weeks, she drifted between cheap motels and overnight buses, never staying in one place long enough for her parents' private investigator to catch up. She ate stale sandwiches, showered in dingy bathrooms, and slept with her backpack as a pillow, the will zipped inside. It was all she had, her proof, her weapon. One night, in a bus station bathroom stall, Olivia stared at her reflection. The white satin gown was gone, replaced by jeans and a second-hand hoodie. She was no longer the Hale family's obedient puppet in pearls and soft makeup. She was a ghost, and ghosts can slip through walls. But she needed more than escape. She needed a plan. She knew the Hales would bury her alive in lawsuits if they found her. They would twist every lie they'd ever told, paint her as ungrateful, unstable, undeserving. They'd say, "Look at our daughter, unfit, unwell. That will must be fake." She couldn't let that happen. So she took the next step. She called the only lawyer she could afford, a small-town probate attorney named Carla Ruiz. Carla didn't flinch when Olivia showed her the will, though her brows lifted when Olivia told her everything: the arranged marriage, the stolen inheritance, the years of manipulation by her toxic parents. "You know they're going to fight this, right?" Carla said, flipping through the yellowed pages. "They're rich. They'll drag you through court until you break." "I won't break," Olivia said. The words surprised her. How steady they sounded, how true they felt in her throat. Carla leaned back. "All right, Olivia. Then we'll start by proving this is legitimate. Witness signatures, property records, anything that shows your parents hid it from you." The next few months were hell and hope stitched together. Olivia worked at diners, gas stations, cleaned motel rooms. She sent Carla every penny she could spare. When she wasn't working, she camped out in dusty county clerk offices and public record archives, tracing old deeds, pulling signatures, hunting for the thread that would unravel her parents' lies. Every time she found a piece of proof, she felt a piece of herself lock into place. This was no longer just survival, it was revenge. The kind that doesn't swing wild but strikes clean. The kind that makes toxic parents pay for every lie they fed you as love. One afternoon, after a double shift waiting tables, she came back to the tiny apartment she'd just managed to rent under a fake name. A letter waited in the mailbox. A lawsuit from her parents' lawyer, accusing her of fraud, slander, emotional distress. Her hands shook as she tore it open, but when she finished reading, she laughed. A raw, almost feral sound. She knew this was coming, and she knew what she would do. She called Carla. "They're suing me." Carla sighed through the line. "Good. That means they're worried. Let them come. We're ready." But Olivia didn't stop there. She found side gigs, delivering food, late-night copywriting, bookkeeping for small businesses. Anything that paid cash and didn't ask questions. She slept 3 hours a night, lived on instant noodles, and poured every extra dime into Carla's war chest. She also learned Olivia taught herself contract law, inheritance loopholes, corporate structures, the same tools her parents used to bind her. She would now wield to break them. For the first time, she wasn't just running from her toxic parents. She was hunting them, piece by piece, in paper trails and signatures. And slowly, fear turned into something sharper. Purpose. She imagined the day she'd stand in court, look her parents in the eye, and say, "This ends now." One night, staring at the boxes of documents she'd gathered, Olivia whispered to herself, "They made me a tool. Now I'm the blade." Outside her window, the city pulsed. Lights and noise and life. Inside, Olivia felt the power of her grandfather's name, his signature inked in her veins, stronger than her parents' greed could ever be. She didn't know exactly how long it would take, but she knew this. The next time the Hales saw her, they wouldn't recognize the quiet girl they sold for a new car. They'd see the woman ready to bury their greed once and for all. And this time, they wouldn't get to write the ending. Olivia learned quickly that revenge wasn't just about anger. It was about patience, precision, and paperwork. Her toxic parents had spent years using her as currency. Now she would use their own weapons against them: money, silence, and the illusion of control. Her first step was anonymity. She changed her name on every lease, every paycheck. She opened bank accounts in small towns no one would think to check. She worked under aliases, careful to keep her trail cold. Every dollar she earned was split, half for rent and food, half for Carla, her tireless lawyer who treated Olivia's fight like it was her own. While Olivia built her new life in the shadows, Carla chipped away at the lies her parents left behind. They dug through county records and dusty safety deposit boxes. Olivia traveled to courthouses 2 states away to unearth property deeds signed by her grandfather. Contracts her parents forged, accounts they hid. Each scrap of paper was a nail in the coffin of the Hales' false kingdom. At night, when the city outside her tiny apartment finally went quiet, Olivia spread documents across the floor like puzzle pieces. Yellowed wills, letters from her grandfather, forged statements with her father's careless signatures. She arranged them, connected them, memorized every date and name. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the quiet old man who once told her bedtime stories while her mother whispered to lawyers in the next room. But information alone wouldn't topple the fortress her toxic parents built. She needed leverage, and leverage meant money, real money. So Olivia did what her parents never imagined she could do. She started her own small real estate business. She called it Evergreen Holdings, a nod to her grandfather's garden, the only place she ever felt safe as a child. She began small, using the last of her savings to buy run-down houses at auction, fixing them with her own hands, flipping them for profit. She learned how to negotiate, how to spot desperate sellers, how to charm banks that would otherwise slam doors in her face. It wasn't glamorous. She worked weekends hauling scrap wood and repainting moldy walls. She watched YouTube tutorials at 3 a.m., taught herself bookkeeping and marketing in stolen moments between shifts at the diner. Every time exhaustion threatened to drag her under, she thought of Margaret's brittle voice hissing, "You'll never make it without us." And she pushed harder. 2 years passed like this, one exhausted, determined step at a time. By the end of the second year, Evergreen Holdings was no longer a secret side hustle. It was a legitimate business with quiet partners and a growing reputation for turning eyesore properties into fresh investments. She never attached her name directly. The LLC was shielded, the board was stacked with trustworthy proxies. If her parents came looking, they'd find nothing but empty paper trails and fake names. Then came her first taste of real revenge. A bank in her hometown, the same one where her father once bragged about his perfect credit, quietly listed an overdue loan on an old property Margaret and Philip Hale used as collateral for their fancy lifestyle. They were behind on payments. Olivia, through Evergreen Holdings, bought that debt overnight. It wasn't about the money yet. It was about the thrill of pulling one brick out of their fortress while they slept soundly, certain they were untouchable. As she signed the purchase agreement for that first piece of her parents' downfall, Olivia felt her pulse settle into something cold and calm. This was no longer escape. This was war. Her toxic parents had built their fake kingdom on her back. Now she was tearing it down from the inside, one mortgage, one hidden loan, one unpaid tax lien at a time. And when she was ready, they wouldn't even see the blade until it was buried in their last dollar. By the third year, Olivia's quiet plan wasn't so quiet anymore. At least, not in the halls of the bank managers and debt collectors who now knew Evergreen Holdings as the young, aggressive company buying up distressed assets no one else wanted to touch. What no one knew was that half those distressed assets were linked back to Margaret and Philip Hale's carefully hidden empire of debt and illusions. Olivia discovered just how deeply her toxic parents had borrowed against their country club life. Second mortgages, secret loans, quiet IOUs disguised as bridge funding for phantom projects that never really existed. Every time they threw a party in that marble-floored mansion, they were spending money they didn't really have. Money Olivia now owned through shell notes and quiet debt buyouts. It was so simple it almost made her laugh. Her parents, who'd once sold her future to buy a new car, were now unwittingly paying her every time they signed a check they couldn't cover. The first sign of trouble for the Hales came in the form of a single letter. A foreclosure notice slid under the front door of their perfect white house. The same house Olivia's arranged marriage had paid for. Margaret's shriek echoed through the marble foyer. Philip raged at the bank, at lawyers, at each other, but there was nothing to rage at. No name to trace, no face to blame. Evergreen Holdings was just another company, just another creditor calling in a debt. They scrambled, of course, sold some jewelry, liquidated stock options, whispered to friends about a temporary cash flow problem. But Olivia was patient. She knew their pride wouldn't let them ask for help until they were truly drowning. So she waited, buying more of their debt in silence, piece by piece. Sometimes she would sit in her small modern office overlooking the city, nothing fancy but hers, and read the emails Margaret sent to banks begging for extensions. The same mother who once bragged, "My daughter does what she's told," was now begging strangers for mercy she'd never shown her own child. It was delicious, and it wasn't enough. When the second foreclosure letter arrived, this time for the vacation property they'd bragged about for years, Margaret finally cracked. She showed up at the bank in a designer coat and big sunglasses, trying to charm the branch manager like she used to charm Olivia's school principal. But charm only works when you still have leverage. And now Olivia held it all. Philip tried the old threats. He hired a lawyer to send intimidating letters to Evergreen Holdings, not realizing his daughter was the ghost behind the corporate door. He threatened lawsuits for predatory lending, for harassment. Olivia's legal team sent back polite, airtight responses quoting every contract her parents had willingly signed. The more they struggled, the tighter Olivia's net grew. Rumors began to spread in the country club, hush-hush gossip that maybe the Hales weren't as invincible as they pretended. Friends stopped answering calls. Dinner invitations dried up. Creditors they thought were loyal started demanding early payments, spooked by whispers of insolvency. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in meetings by day, studied legal loopholes by night, and made sure every step stayed hidden until the final blow. The best revenge wasn't loud. It was surgical, precise, inevitable. When the third property fell, a small commercial space they'd rented out for extra cash, the panic really set in. Margaret called Olivia's old number at midnight, sobbing into the voicemail box that no longer existed. Philip drank too much, slamming doors and yelling about betrayal. But they never guessed it was Olivia pulling the strings. They still pictured her as the weak girl in the white satin dress, the obedient child who'd vanished in shame. They didn't know she was the storm at their door. Can you feel Olivia's revenge tightening like a noose around her toxic parents? Do you think she should forgive them? Or finish what she started? Drop your thoughts below and comment Team Revenge if you stand with Olivia. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. By the time Olivia was ready to strike, the Hales were teetering on the edge of ruin and didn't even know whose hand pushed them there. Their fancy dinners had turned into silent nights filled with cold leftovers and unopened bills stacked on the kitchen counter. The same neighbors who once envied Margaret's perfect parties now whispered behind manicured hedges about foreclosure signs that might appear overnight. Olivia watched it all unfold from a distance. Court filings, bank notices, and gossip columns that hinted at the downfall of the perfect Hale family. But she knew rumors weren't enough. To bury her toxic parents for good, she needed to drag the truth into the light, where no mask could hide it anymore. That's when she called Carla. Sitting in her small but sunlit office, Olivia spread the final documents across the table. The original will, the forged copies her parents had slipped through probate, and years of financial records proving how they'd siphoned off her grandfather's inheritance. Carla read through the evidence in silence, then looked up with a slow, steady nod. "This is ironclad, Olivia. They won't be able to twist this in court. Not this time." Olivia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It wasn't relief, not yet, but it was something close. She knew once she stepped into court, her parents would come at her with everything they had left. Lies, lawyers, fake tears, maybe even public pity plays. But she was done being the quiet, obedient daughter. The day the summons went out, Margaret and Philip Hale received it like a slap to the face. They had no idea Olivia had tracked every missing dollar, every shady deal they'd buried under fake signatures and hushed threats. And now, they were being dragged to court not by strangers, but by the very daughter they'd once traded for a new house key. Margaret tried calling. Olivia didn't pick up. Philip's lawyer sent letters begging for a settlement. Olivia's legal team sent them right back, untouched. For once, she was the one who got to say no. A week before the trial, Olivia stood outside the family's old house, the house she'd once been sold to keep polished and pretty. She watched through the iron gate as Margaret paced the front steps, phone glued to her ear, voice shrill and frantic. Philip sat on the porch, staring into nothing, a man watching his kingdom sink beneath him. Olivia didn't smile. This wasn't about satisfaction. This was about reclaiming her name from her toxic parents, about making sure no other child of theirs would ever be used the way she was. She turned away before Margaret could spot her. She had no interest in empty drama at the gate. She'd see them in court, under bright lights, with every secret laid bare for the world to judge. When she got back in her car, the box of documents sat heavy in the passenger seat. Olivia rested her hand on it, steady, calm. For years, they told her she was nothing without them. Now she would prove she was everything they feared, the truth they could no longer bury. The courthouse was packed on the morning of the Hale hearing. Curious onlookers, local reporters, old neighbors who once called Margaret and Philip the perfect couple with the perfect daughter. Now they watched Olivia walk in with her head high, a single folder in her hands that could bury decades of secrets. Margaret wore a pale blue suit, her hair perfectly curled, her eyes swollen from fake tears. Philip looked older than Olivia had ever seen him, his posture rigid, but his eyes darting like a cornered animal. They still hadn't accepted that their power was gone, that the obedient girl they'd raised to be quiet and pretty was now the woman who'd orchestrated their downfall. When the judge called the case, Olivia stepped forward first. Her lawyer spoke for her at first, but when the judge asked if she wished to say anything, she rose without hesitation. Her voice didn't tremble. She laid out the story piece by piece. The night she ran away, the secret will she'd found, the forged copies her toxic parents had hidden, the properties they'd mortgaged to fuel their greed. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens and the occasional gasp when she named account numbers, dates, false signatures. Margaret tried to interrupt, to spin her usual tales about an ungrateful daughter and family misunderstandings. But every lie fell flat when Olivia's lawyer presented the paper trail. Each forged signature, each hidden account was displayed on a screen for the entire room to see. The same secrets they'd buried under layers of charm and intimidation now glared back at them under harsh fluorescent lights. Philip tried rage next, slammed his hand on the table, barked at the judge that Olivia was a liar who was trying to ruin her own family for money. But the judge didn't flinch. He only turned to Olivia's grandfather's original signature, notarized and witnessed by men long gone, but not forgotten. The truth was undeniable. When the verdict was read, Olivia didn't smile or cry. She just stood there, still and quiet, as the judge ruled that the will her toxic parents had buried was valid, that every dollar, every property, every inheritance belonged to her. Margaret covered her face with trembling hands, whispering apologies Olivia no longer cared to hear. Philip stared at his daughter, his lips parted in disbelief. But Olivia didn't give him the satisfaction of meeting his eyes for more than a heartbeat. In the back row, someone let out a low whistle as the Hales were ordered to vacate their beloved mansion and repay misused funds. The perfect family was gone, replaced by headlines about fraud, betrayal, and the daughter who ended it all with nothing but a stolen will and iron resolve. As Olivia stepped outside into the summer sun, the reporters swarmed, microphones pressed forward. "Do you have anything to say to your parents?" She paused at the top of the courthouse steps, looked out at the faces hungry for sound bites, and said, clear enough for the world to hear, "I buried my toxic parents' greed the same way they tried to bury me, for good." And with that, Olivia turned and walked away, free, unbent, and finally, truly hers. When the final court order came through, Olivia stood alone in what used to be her parents' grand foyer. The marble floor gleamed just as it did the day they first forced her to pose for engagement photos, a perfect daughter packaged for sale. Now, sunlight streamed through tall windows onto boxes packed with her parents' crystalline paintings, waiting for the bank's movers to clear them out. The house smelled different now. Gone were the expensive candles Margaret used to mask the rot of secrets. Gone were the fake laughs that echoed down these halls at charity dinners where Olivia was paraded like a prized trophy. What lingered instead was silence, honest, echoing silence that belonged to her. Margaret and Philip had been given 30 days to vacate, but in the end, they didn't last a week. The news had shredded their social circle overnight. Family friends stopped answering calls. No more charity invitations, no more country club handshakes. Their final days in the house they'd built on Olivia's back were spent packing boxes in bitterness and shame. They'd offered her last-minute apologies, pathetic half-pleas for mercy when they realized there was nowhere else to run. Margaret even tried to grab Olivia's hand as they passed in the hallway one final time. "You can't mean to leave us with nothing, Liv. We're still your parents." Olivia didn't flinch. She simply looked at her mother, this stranger who had sold her piece by piece, and said, calm as a judge, "You chose what you are to me. Now I'm choosing what you'll never be again." Philip said nothing at all. He just glared at Olivia over a taped-up box labeled family china, as if daring her to feel guilt. But the truth was, there was no guilt left to give them. They had carved it out of her long ago. Now all that remained was resolve. When the door slammed behind her parents for the last time, Olivia stood in the foyer alone. She breathed in the emptiness like fresh air. The house was finally hers, not because she wanted the marble floors or the gold fixtures, but because the truth of who she was had survived every lie her toxic parents built around her. Standing in the quiet, she walked room to room, the study where she'd found the hidden will, the bedroom where she'd once planned her escape with trembling hands, the dining room where her parents toasted her marriage like it was a business merger. Each corner held a ghost, but now each ghost was powerless. She didn't plan to keep the house. She would sell it, donate what she didn't need, wash its walls of every whispered threat and greedy promise. But this moment, standing here, alone and unafraid, was hers forever. Margaret and Philip Hale faded from headlines within weeks, replaced by new scandals. They moved into a cramped rental far from the city, stripped of luxury, clinging to the last scraps of an image no one believed in anymore. The world saw them for what they really were, just another pair of toxic parents who learned too late that not every child stays silent. And Olivia? She wasn't a victim anymore. She was the proof that no amount of manipulation can bury the truth forever, not when you're brave enough to dig it up, stand in it, and make it yours again. Months after the courtroom lights faded and her toxic parents vanished from her daily thoughts, Olivia stood at the edge of her grandfather's old garden, the same patch of green he once tended with weathered hands and gentle words. The marble house was gone now, sold to pay debts and fund something bigger than any inheritance. Freedom for others who'd been trapped like her. Olivia had taken her share and done what the Hales would never understand. She gave it away wisely. She kept enough for a modest home, a simple life on her own terms. The rest she poured into a trust she named after her grandfather, the man who'd believed she deserved better long before she did. The Evergreen Trust became her true revenge, a fund to help teenagers and young adults break free from families who treated them like bargaining chips. Olivia's story inspired others to speak up. Some wrote her letters, handwritten, raw notes that made her kitchen table feel like a small sanctuary for voices that had been silenced for far too long. Sometimes she visited youth shelters anonymously, helping teens navigate paperwork or college forms late into the night. She never gave them false hope. She gave them truth. "They'll try to convince you that you owe them your silence," she'd say, voice steady. "But you don't. You owe yourself the chance to start over, no matter what they took." The nights were quiet now. Olivia didn't wake up gasping for air, dreaming of slammed doors and forced promises. Instead, she woke up early to plant flowers in the small backyard of her new cottage, daisies and wild lavender, the same her grandfather once pressed between books for her to find. There were days the old wounds still ached. Betrayal leaves bruises that bloom again when you least expect it. But every time doubt crept in, she looked at what she'd built from the ashes. A life no longer shackled to lies, a legacy that didn't end at a courtroom door, but bloomed outward like the garden at her feet. One evening, she sat on her porch as the sun dipped low. Letters from Evergreen Trust recipients piled on her lap. One read, "Because of you, I left my toxic parents. I'm safe now." Olivia traced the words with her fingertip, let herself cry for a moment, not for what she'd lost, but for what she'd given back to the world. If anyone asked her what revenge really was, she'd tell them it was never about hate. It was about ending the cycle, about standing in the middle of everything broken and planting something that could never be poisoned again. As dusk settled, Olivia leaned back, closed her eyes, and breathed deep. Somewhere out there, Margaret and Philip Hale still lived in a cramped apartment, clinging to old stories no one cared to hear. But their power was gone, buried with the secrets they'd once hoarded like gold. In their place bloomed new stories, new voices, proof that the children of toxic parents could grow into something strong and unbreakable when given just one chance to start fresh. And if Olivia's story did nothing else, it would remind every child like her that freedom wasn't given. It was taken back piece by piece until it belonged to you and no one else ever again.